important to document these stories and for ourselves and the future generation. You'll be able to find this podcast on Black Art in America. I want to thank the March on Washington Film Festival for providing a space and an opportunity for us to gather around art and film, culture and fellowship, and bring everyone together. I was excited to bring Mr. Jim Nixon, who's a phenomenal collector and patron of the arts. I first met Jim several months back, and we got to be really, really close friends and working on projects like the Philadelphia Fine Art Show that'll take place September 14th through the 16th. But Jim is an avid collector of material. I'm going to let him introduce himself here shortly and talk a little bit about the overall scope of the material that they're collecting and how he got inspired. And we'll do a back and forth dialogue and answer a few questions too about building a collection. And, we'll just kind of take it from there. But Jim Nixon is a collector of African American material, primarily women artists. So here's a microphone, Jim. Just feel free to pick up. Please introduce yourself.
Jim Nixon. We've been collecting for about, let's say, 5, 6, 7 years. We started out. I don't know how many. Show of hands. I don't know how many of you have kids, but for us. We had kids, and I would say we went through 3 stages from an art standpoint. When we had kids, it was appreciating art, which meant we couldn't afford it, and because everything goes to the kids. Kids grow up, they get out, and then we kind of went through this phase of accumulating art without any discrimination in taste. So we like this on the wall because it matches this sofa. It looks good in this room. So we were doing that, and that through that phase I would say lasted maybe a year, 2 years, and we really stopped to look at what we were doing because we were buying a lot of art. And looked at what we had collected or what we had accumulated, and kind of realized that most of the pieces that we loved were women artists. Not that we didn't love any of the male artists, but the women spoke to us. So we really started to look at it. Let's start collecting. I mean, really, with a discriminating eye, and what do we want to accomplish? So, we looked at it. We put together kind of a 10-year plan. Now, for us, from our standpoint, we put together a foundation. All of our art goes into a foundation, which can't be sold. So the idea is to get pieces over the next, say, 5 to 7 years, and from that period develop an education curriculum. Ideally, what we want to do is have an education foundation. We have the foundation, we have an idea of what we want to accomplish from an education standpoint, but then that 5 to 7 years out, it's really put that curriculum together, and then we'll say during that concurrent 5 to 7 year period is kind of really figuring out, okay, where the pieces going to be? Are they going to be in something that's already existing? Is it something that we want to build? What's the direction we want to go? And we don't have an answer for that yet. Mm-hmm. So again, we're still in the collecting phase, but from a collector's standpoint, we were just like anyone else. We didn't know anything. We went out and educated ourselves, and if you look at our collection, we have kind of we look at kind of from a base standpoint. I wrote down some names because I didn't want to get stalled in any event, but we kind of look at our collection is we really want to focus on some established artists and more emerging artists. So from the foundation standpoint, we have like the Betty Sars, the Samela Lewis, Elizabeth Catlett, and we've got Sid Carpenter. Then when you look at kind of the base of the tree, I'll say, because that's kind of the roots. We have Tamara Madeline, Phyllis Stevens, Reber Dickerson Hill, Kimberly Camp, and some others. Then when you look at the emerging, we've got a lot of the emerging artists. Delita Martin, Beverly Smith, Satali Miranda. We even have some artists who are in college that we've found, and we follow them, we collect them. Like a young lady named Haziza Abdallah, she's a photographer. She's the only photographer we have in the collection at this point. And we started collecting her when she was in. She had just graduated Lincoln, and now she's going to Tyler, full ride and also a stipend. So obviously, Tyler wants her really bad. You figure they're paying her to go to school. And then we've got some other young artists that we have.
You know, you've got one. It's actually Jim has.
Well, I was going to mention that one.
Well, I want to do a little lead in if I can. You know, there's recently on Black Art in America. Please follow us online. We polled 10 African American owned black galleries, or 10 African American galleries around the country, and asked them, okay, give us a list of your top male and female artists that collectors should be considering right now. And each gallery gave us a list of one male and one female. Well, you know, needless to say that of the 10 women artists to collect from, you know, recommended by African American dealers, we're privileged to be working with Lavette Ballard, who's here showing in the space. And Jim is an avid collector of Lavette's work. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, Lavette?
We met, and this is what I would encourage any collector to do. We met Lavette. In fact, I remember I called Lavette. I text Lavette, and she texted me right back. I was like, "Whoa, wow! I didn't expect that." And we had a little conversation through texting, and she was going to be. We live close to each other. She was going to be at this event. I think it was that evening, and I just erased whatever I had going on. That evening, I bolted over there to meet her. We fell in love with her, and just her character, her person, the way she viewed her art. And for us, my wife and I, we have balance. We try to have balance in the collection. And I fell in love with Lavette and Lavette's art immediately. Felt this was something we wanted to have in the collection.
Right.
My wife saw it. I actually sent my wife a picture of it, and she was like, "Oh yeah, we have to." Yeah. And just knowing Lavette, we were just really. It was great to get to know the character and get to know the person, and what she's trying to accomplish from her artistic standpoint. Right. And we told her, hey, we told her what we wanted, and I think she was a little. I would hope she was surprised, but or pleased, and so we now own a Lavette Ballard, which we're excited to have, and that list, which I didn't. We had no idea that article was coming out, so we counted the artists that we have, and we had 6 of those artists in our collection. And it wasn't like we went out. We purchased pieces based on what we love. We don't look at pieces from the standpoint of appreciation. I mean, some collectors do. Because of our long-term strategy, we don't care if we buy a piece for X. We don't care if it's worth X plus or X minus 5 years from now, because we love the piece. So when you look at it, for us, when we look at it like that, we don't get caught up in,
Right.
looking at what's the market say about, this artist.
Yeah,
or
because you
this
can easily
sector.
get driven down a rabbit hole if you're following the market. And you're right. Many collectors collect for a number of different reasons. And one of the takeaways from the art fair that we had in Houston at our last show, and what the market is really indicating is the interest in contemporary artists. I mean, while we have a lot of people who have the legacy artists of the days gone by, the Beard and the Catlett Jakes, and the artists of that generation. I mean, a lot of collectors are really interested in who's new, what new voices are being created and developed right now. One of the questions I wanted to ask, actually I've got a number of different questions. I want us to, have some takeaways for the audience, and, just thinking about like tips that we would recommend. Definitely, find some work to fall in love with. One of the beauties about collecting and working with contemporary artists is the relationships that you're able to build with those artists and be able to grow with those artists. But right now, there's probably more art being generated or being created than in ever, at any point in history, I would say. When you take a look at the amount of work that's being generated, what are the important considerations for the art that you decide to acquire? Like, how do you know what's right for you?
In all candor, I think we've been fortunate enough to be able to speak to most of a lot of the emerging artists that we have, and I'm not going to take away anything from self-taught artists, because we do have self-taught artists in the collection, but in all candor, I think our collection does gravitate towards artists who've had some formal training. And again, that doesn't take away from artists who are self-taught, because again, we have them in the portfolio. But especially when we're talking about emerging artists or younger artists, and you take like a Haziza Abdallah, we've got, it's not like her pieces are expensive today. I'm sure 10 years from now, I won't be able to afford her work. But recognizing where she is today, and hopefully that she's going to stay with it, that's what we kind of hope. We've followed some artists who were self-taught, and unfortunately, they didn't stay with it. And that's not to take away from their commitment, but unfortunately, other things, they chose to go another direction with their life, and that doesn't mean they won't come back.
Right, but to give the flip side of that, Satirian avid collectors, and I've seen that on both.
Yeah,
that could easily happen.
It could easily happen
on both the self-taught as well as the trained artists. When you started to collect, one of the things most people talk about is to set a budget, to have an idea of what you're looking to spend, buy the best art that you can afford, and so it's not necessarily about quantity, it's about quality. Has that been the case with you in the sense? I mean, do you typically set a budget, or what's your strategy in terms of acquiring works?
Yeah, I think we have an idea of what we want to spend, which, given that the kids are out of the house and we're excited about that, which is more than we would have had otherwise. So we're excited about that, but we do try to stay within that.
Okay.
There are times, in all candor, where we've gone outside of that. As we've built our collection, and Najee's certainly aware of this, we've found a particular artist, Louise Clemenhoff, who we've actually, I would say, built our collection around. We've got probably 10 pieces of her work. She does predominantly figurative work. She's 93 years old. Back in the late 50s through the 60s, she was, while a lot of work that African American artists were doing had a lot of social commentary, explicit social commentary, her art was a little more subtle. and she would always, and she, she's very dear to us. We've gone past the relationship of collector artist. I mean, we're really. I mean, she's very dear to us. But she'll say, I was a hermit. I really didn't get out and really kind of push my art. But people who've seen her pieces are just blown away by them. And I know you've seen them. Her art's incredible. And it's in a lot of private collections. We have a piece that was at the Woodmere Museum in Philadelphia and also showed at PAFA. So it's circa 1970, and we've got some other pieces of hers. So from a collector's standpoint, we were fortunate enough to find a particular artist that we fell in love with, and we were able to talk to, and actually she's helped us shape our collection, as has Levette. We bounce things off Levette. So talking to the artist, having a relationship with the artist where you can talk to them is, to me, equally as important as a collector.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, relationships in general, because, I mean, a lot of collectors, you're going to find that, having relationships with dealers, with gallerists, your local museums, your art institutions, seeing as much art as possible to help you hone your eye, become a more informed collector, is definitely a way to go. In terms of acquiring works, a lot of people think that, they go outside and they see the price tag and they get, I didn't plan to spend X amount of dollars for this amount of work right now. But just know that, generally speaking, artists, the dealers, the galleries, I mean, they will work with you. I mean, they will, help you to set up an installment plan that makes it accessible for you to acquire work over a given period of time.
And I want to interject on that. That's really.
Hey, Black Art in America family, this is Najee Dorsey. Thank you again for listening to another installment of BAIA Talk. We're going to take a minute to bring you up to speed on some of the things that we've got going. If you enjoy this particular program or the other programs here on Black Art in America and would like to be a patron supporter, we now have that capabilities. Visit the patronage link. You can find it in the educational resources tab in the navigation bar. I also want to make you aware of we're introducing BuyBlackArt.com. Will be a fine art listing place for artists and collectors to list works at no commissions. That's right, no commissions. So be sure to stay tuned for that. That's launching June 1st. The other thing is that if you always wanted to start a business or you've given thought to starting a business, we now have Garden Art for the Soul. So look for the Garden Art Biz link in the nav bar. And once again, thank you for listening to this message of some of the new and exciting things happening with Black Art in America. And we're going back to the program.
We found really a great thing. I think some of our reluctance early in collecting was, one, we can't afford it, and two, just kind of the way we were young and just made the feel when you walk into a gallery that you can't, if they look at you, you can't afford this, so get out. Yeah. But then as we grew, and I'll say matured from a collector standpoint, we certainly found that galleries would work with us if we saw a piece that we really liked that was out of our set budget, and they'd work with you. So to that end, one, I'd say is from a collector standpoint, yeah, they're willing to work with you. Two, I'd say be careful, don't stretch yourself. We've certainly realized, hey, there are, like as Najee said, there are a lot of works out there by some great artists. There are certain artists we would love to have, but we just can't afford them. Some of the emerging artists, we're very comfortable with. We love them and we love the pieces. So.
Yeah, one of the things that's really important, I think, for collectors is, having, you talked about earlier resources, resources that were beneficial to you, but having access to information is key. An informed collector is a knowledgeable collector, seeing more art, reading books, collecting art books, and becoming more familiar with, artists of the past, the different movements, the different genres, how to protect your art. So on and so forth. Different books that you would recommend. Helene Taha's Collecting African American Art is one. Resources online, definitely Black Art in America. You want to look at Culture Type has a great platform. Also, the International Review of African American Art is a good journal to subscribe to. Are there any resources that you found? Any additional resources that you
Google.
found? Hey,
we've got books, but I mean, we spend a lot of time on Google. We have a Tamara Madden.
Yeah, of course. I know.
We've been, we were looking at Tamara Madden for about close to a year when we decided to make a purchase of one of her pieces, and we did. So, we're fortunate. We've got like Maya Freelon. I mean, you Google her, there's a whole bunch of stuff. So, Googling artists, I think.
Talking to other collectors.
Yeah. Googling how to protect your art, how to insure your art. I mean, there are a lot of books, but we kind of use that as a resource to point us in direction. And I can't stress enough about talking to artists. If there's one thing you are able to do, if you are collecting art, and you are collecting art within your means, then you have access to those artists.
Oh yeah.
That's key, because as you grow and your budget grows and you move into another area of collection, you'll have a foundation. And quite frankly, sometimes some of those artists are growing with you. So and that's key. It's not like Elizabeth Catlett and the others. There were people who were collecting those Elizabeth Catlett, Lawrence Jacobs, and they weren't paying today's prices.
Oh no,
they were paying.
I've got a great story to share. I was introduced to a collector. Matter of fact, in Philadelphia, he was a physician. In 1972, he had got out of residency. And he went and bought a painting, a Barclay Hendricks painting, for $1,200. Well, his newly married mother-in-law, right? She pulled her daughter to the side and said, "You got to get rid of this guy. He crazy, spending that kind of money on the piece." Well, just so you know, I mean, you never can tell what time they lead to. Barclay Hendricks' work is now, auction records of over $1 million. And so, like those stories are always interesting. I mean, but it doesn't even have to be like, that type of artist. I mean, it happens all the time. One of the things I wanted to kind of talk to briefly is also a lot of people run from the label of being a collector. What is a collector? And some people say, I know Diaspora Rhythms is a collectors group out of Chicago, and their thing is if you have over 7 pieces of anything, then you're a collector. Some people say once you start to collect past the walls of being full, but there's a power to being a collector. I mean, everyone from the institutions to the artists to other collectors, they want to meet, they want to know who's acquiring this material, who are the stewards of this generation, of this cultural material. I mean, do you embrace the title of being a collector?
I guess if you fill out a job application, and they said hobby, I would say accumulating art or art. I don't know if you want to say collecting. That's the name that it's given. But we spend, if we look at a typical week, I work for a living, but I would say I spend probably 3 hours a day. Mm-hmm. on art. So it's either from.
That's a lot.
Yeah, no, it is.
Yeah.
So it's either, and because we want to be informed and we want to understand. So that's, that might be an hour before, that might be 7 o'clock in the morning, or it might be, 2 hours in the evening. I mean, because we're always reading something, passing articles back and forth.
The before we open it up, because we've got a scale down panel, I want to definitely take some questions, see if we can help answer any questions the best we can. One of the things I want to mention is I can't say enough about collector / patron. And that's a particular thing. That's a difference. When you're a collector, there's an exchange. I give you money, you give me art. But patrons, support ideas and concepts and opportunities. One of the things I definitely want to, bring to the fore is to say thank you for being not only one heck of a collector, but being a patron of the arts, and particularly of the things and projects that we've done in the past and the things that we're doing in the future. I mean, it's I just want to give you, your due, and for all the collectors and patrons out there. I know we have a number of people in the audience that are collecting and may have, and some that are looking to get started and may have some questions. So I would like to, take this time to fill, you okay
Sure.
to fill in a couple questions? Anyone have any questions out there? I have a hard time seeing because of the lights. I'm sorry, I can't see. Is there one?
I don't see it.
Ayana, anything?
Always. You mentioned that you started having an interest in art when your children were small, and your budget was limited, as it were. I've been having conversations with the millennials and the importance of being able to start thinking about collecting. Can you talk about actually the benefits? I mean, sure, it's an aesthetic piece, it's on your wall, and you enjoy watching it and looking at it and buying more and more. But from a young person's perspective, I remember going years ago up to Swan and talking to a guy, and he said that his aunt had a conversation with him when he was 19 in college.
Mm-hmm.
And what's a good investment, as it were, financially at that particular time? Can you give some guidance to younger people? As a young person sitting here next to me, well, he's younger than me, so
No.
he's 30. You can be my son.
He's not that much younger than you.
Aren't you sweet? But he was saying he's thinking about it. What are some of the what will push you over the edge? What will make you take the jump? It's like you haven't had any swimming lessons, but you're starting to read the Black Art in America. You're reading Culture Type. You're reading Halima Taha's book. What makes you take the
I can't stress enough, and I'll talk from an African American collector's standpoint. It is important to me that we as African Americans support African American artists. You have, what we've all witnessed is today there's this renaissance, or there's such attention given to African American art, and I don't want to speak out of turn. I'm going to be careful about how I choose my words, but when I see, it's great for the artist when some investment banker or whatever comes in and buys a piece that Swan may have had estimated at $200,000, and he pays $1.2 million for it, and then all of a sudden it goes up. Now that artist's value goes up, which is great for that artist. But we should be pushing our artists. When I look at the artist Louise Clementhoff, in all candor, she was she'll say I'm a hermit, and not that many, and the collectors who were collecting her were predominantly white. Now we own 10 of her pieces. Now we might have surpassed her largest collector, but I think, as to your point, as millennials, I think there's a great opportunity to grow with an artist, to identify with an artist. Hey, I'm older than Levette, but there are people who are Levette's age who can buy Levette and grow with her. 20 years from now, when Jim Nixon's in the grave, but you'll be looking and you can say, hey, I own this artist, and let's face it, Levette's going to be somebody. I mean, not that she isn't now, but she's going to be a pretty significant artist to have in any collection, and we're honored to have her. But to that point, I think as millennials, you can identify with artists and grow with them. So there are artists that young man can identify with who are within his budget, and I don't know what your budget is, but I mean, if it's like mine when like anything like mine was when I was your age, I couldn't afford a whole heck of a lot. But I think again, it's about identifying with that artist because you have access. You can talk to that artist, and I can't stress enough, if you can talk to the artist and you get to grow up with that artist and grow up with that group of artists, that means that says a lot.
I would like to add to that because I mean, again, Satiri and I, we're avid collectors of art. Jim's seen our collection, and I would say like one example that I would give is prior to 2006, the most we had ever paid for a painting was $800 for a work of art. And we found ourselves in Chicago at an art show, and I just ran into this painting by Nani de Silva, Afro-Caribbean artist, and I just had to have it. I mean, I'm like, and the price was $2,500. I never spent that amount of money on a piece of art before, but the need to want that in my life exceeded that $2,500, and I knew that I would make that up again somewhere. And so I think your tolerance changes, and so you can acquire art. I mean, it doesn't even have to be $800. I mean, we've got a collection we're extremely proud of. But I mean, we go to thrift stores and we find things, objects that interest us, and it might be. I mean, I've got some watercolor paintings for $45 of scenes in New Orleans, and I added that to the collection because I loved it. And so if it takes you starting off with finding things that speak to you at your price point, I would just say, get as much original material as you can that speaks to you. And as your taste change and as your budget evolves, then it will grow and your art will grow with that. So
I think the young lady behind her.
I can't see.
Actually, I did have a question. So you spoke a lot about connecting with emerging artists and college students or our school students. How do you go about connecting across the board? I mean, there are a lot of schools, there are a lot of programs. How do you do that?
Right, there are, and I think it's word of mouth. In all candor, I'm in Philadelphia, so the only way I'm going to hear about particular artists, certainly an emerging artist in Georgia, is if someone tells me about that person, or I read a particular article. There was and that's exactly how we went about it. Haziza, she had a piece literally at a gallery. The gallery owner teaches at a college, and she thought that Haziza was one of her best students, if not her best student. She said, I'm going to put this piece, in my gallery. Maybe it'll sell. I saw it, and I said, wow. And then I came back a couple of days later, and I said, the piece was $200, and I bought it. Well, now other folks have seen this, and we're talking about this. This is a young lady who's just now starting Tyler. So now this particular piece, other people have seen it, and someone in New York said to her, I want that, and I'll give you $600. All of a sudden, that $200 piece is now valued at $600. Not that I don't care about the value, but my point is, people are starting to recognize her, and I think that's through word of mouth. Another young lady who we are starting to collect, she happened to win a congressional art contest. And that's access anybody can read. You read in the paper, you see this name, young lady wins an art contest. Mm-hmm. I'm like, wow. So I called our congressman's office, and I said, hey, I mean, this may sound strange, but, I told them who I was, so I'm sure they'll probably say, who is this guy? Make sure he's not some nut. And I said, I'd like to meet, this young lady. If you can have her get in touch with us. And I explained the situation. It was probably a month or so later, because she'd started University of Pittsburgh. Mm. I get a call, and we met with, and she's again, she's 18 years old, so we invited her and her parents to dinner. We looked at, and we just had a conversation about art and what she wants to do. Had a subsequent, met with them subsequently. In fact, introduced her to Levette, because again, it's all about, it's about relationships. So introduced her to Levette because she's a young artist. We're going to end up with three of her pieces and grow as she grows. So to that end, I don't think the access that we have is access that you have. And her name was in an article, and like Aziza happened to be in a little small gallery somewhere, so we asked about it. So a lot of it is that, and just kind of looking at the landscape.
Right. And one thing that I would say too is that you've got artists that are, sometimes it's all about timing. That they're creating work that's important today, but it may be next week or next year that they get recognized. I can give you a perfect example. When I had a show at the Columbus Museum, and shortly after that I was introduced, and this is 2014, and shortly after that I was introduced to the work of Amy Sherrill. And so when I saw it, I said, man, this is something that the museum should be aware of, because she's from the same city that we now reside. And so I sent it to the museum director and encouraged her to take a look at the work. And now this 2015. 2017, 2016, Amy wins the national portrait competition. Prior to that, I talked to her like a few months prior to that, and her work was selling between like $6,000 and $8,000 for a significant piece. And she talked about how some of the collectors are like, well, why are you so high, right? She wins the award, prices immediately jump to 15 to 30. She gets the Obama Commission, Michelle Obama Commission. Now, you're on a waiting list for 150,000. Well, the talent was there in 2015. It's
not different. The
talent
hasn't changed.
Right, the talent hasn't changed. And so it's like, we need to look at the artists that are creating today and just understand that the market is the market, and that can't always be the determining factor for, how you should go about building your collection. You find the works that speak to you, and commit to it. And if it happens to hit, then, it's congratulations, So, and one other thing, I got this collecting in Chicago, same thing, collecting in Chicago. She had a red dot, blue dot system for the collection in case something happened to her and her husband at the same time. The kids would know, okay, if it's a green dot, just whatever you want to do. If it's a red dot, do some investigation, right? Well, the work she bought of mine was kind of green dot, right? And so I go, and so as my trajectory of my career has climbed, a few years later, I noticed it had the red dot on it. The work hadn't changed. Only the perception of how she saw me relative to the market, had changed. You know what I mean? So find some artists to connect with is what I would say. We got a question right here. What's that?
Such a fascinating discussion, because for me, the whole issue around the value of a piece and how a piece moves to a gallery or to a museum or a piece into an award, how do you determine what's their base value, right?
Yeah.
When you make your purchase, it just
Well,
how do you do that? And how much you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well, the market. I mean, I think the market is a good indicator. I mean, the market is going to bear what it's going to bear. I mean, you go and do some research, talk with collectors, see how the work has tracked or has sold over a given period of time. And most collectors are really patient when you're talking about a sizable purchase. You know, I mean, generally if it's typically most art that I'm aware of that I'm dealing with, and if it's under 3,000, it's kind of like you just get it because you love it. When you start to be 3, 5, 15, 20, then you start to have a little more scrutiny in how you're going to issue those funds in the calendar and how you're going to acquire those works. So I would say you have to develop good relationships with, again, dealers and gallerists, track artists to see, how they're selling, how they're doing in their career. Talk to other, and talk to artists, talk to collectors. And so that's just part of the process. But, you got any
Well,
questions?
I mean, I think our collecting strategy contrasts to what you're talking about. So we don't care about value. I mean, we have pieces in our collection that have certainly gone up in value. We know that they've gone up in value from when we acquired them. One, for what our long-term strategy is doesn't matter, and two, doesn't matter. So it really, all we care about is, does it fit the collection from a context standpoint? Do we love it? Well, that's all that matters, because since we're not concerned about value, since we're concerned more about the direction of the education foundation, how we set that up, we don't get caught up in how much is this going to be a year from now. How much is this going to be 5 years from now? So we contrast that strategy.
I can't see. Need to wrap. Okay. So we appreciate.
There's one last question.
Oh, well, we may have to.
Very quickly.
Okay. Please.
Well, I wanted to ask, years ago when I was purchasing things that I couldn't afford, I was able to work with galleries to say, can I give you a deposit and we'll pay X amount per month or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do it all the time.
Well, and I'm just saying, some people might want to
Yeah.
be aware that that's an option when you have, particularly if you have a relationship, but even if you don't, it's always worth inquiring. I really want it, but we can't do it this month.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So no, that's we actually mentioned that earlier. We want to bring this to a close. We want to thank the March on Washington Film Festival. I want to thank Jim
Thank you.
for being a part of the panel and the discussion. We can definitely continue this dialogue out in the lobby where the art is, and you can meet some of the artists and you can talk with our staff and get connected with Black Art in America. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
This is Najee Dorsey. You listen to another installment of BAIA Talks. Be sure to follow Black Art in America at blackartinamerica.com and look for us on your favorite social media platform, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. And remember, you can always shop for art online at www.buyblackart.com.